Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. The press conference with Green Party Leader Annamie Paul reacting to the Supreme Court decision will now begin. Joining Ms. Paul today are Lila Williamson and Cooper Price. Bonjour tout le monde. La conférence de presse avec la chef du Parti vert, Annamie Paul, en réaction à la décision de la Cour suprême, va maintenant commencer. Aux côtés de Madame Paul se trouvent Lila Williamson et Cooper Price.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone. It is a real pleasure to be with you on this beautiful day. I come to you from the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. I come to you, je vous adresse aujourd'hui des territoires traditionnels des Mississauga, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, et Huron-Wendat. And today is a good day. Today is an exciting day for people across Canada because the Supreme Court has ruled today that the Federal Greenhouse Gas Pricing Act is indeed constitutional. Now, this is good news in and of itself because we know that carbon pricing and putting a price on carbon is a part of the solution. Not only is it a part, but it is a key element. We know that it is one of the most efficient and effective ways to help reduce greenhouse gases, something that we must do if we are seeking to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. So we know that this was a key part of the puzzle. We know that it's something that required a national response, and so that was very encouraging. We also are very encouraged to see that the Supreme Court has recognized that climate change is real, that it is a matter of national concern and national security, that it requires a coordinated response across levels of government, and that this is an area in which the federal government has a critical role to play, and that by playing that role, the federal government is not trampling unreasonably upon any provincial jurisdiction. And so what this does is that it opens up, in addition to a tax on carbon, it opens up an entire new set of possibilities for tackling the climate emergency, exactly at a time when we should be thinking and talking about a green recovery and the elements of a green recovery. The Green Party of Canada has spoken and proposed some of those innovations. We have been talking now for quite some time about the need to have a carbon border and the possibility now of creating even a North American carbon border, putting a tariff on certain goods that are imported into Canada and hopefully into North America, exactly because it can incentivize greenhouse gas emissions reductions. We have proposed that this is the time to do that along with President Biden, and it's also another essential element. And so as we think about all of the potential ways that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we now know that we have a partner in the Supreme Court, that they recognize the seriousness, the urgency of the matter, and the need for coordination and collaboration across levels of government. Even beyond this decision, though, I certainly hope that our provincial partners will see the main message that I believe the court was trying to convey today, which is that we are stronger together in tackling the climate emergency. This is something that is extra provincial. There is no one province who can do it alone. And a province who is doing a great job will never be able to make up for a province that is doing a terrible job. And so if we are going to truly respect our commitment to this generation and future generations of people in Canada and around the world, if we are going to respect our international obligations, which we have never succeeded in meeting, we have never succeeded in meeting. We have never succeeded in hitting a target. If we are finally going to begin to turn the corner together, then let us first accept that we must do it together, that we must come together in a true spirit of cooperation and collaboration, even if the Supreme Court had ruled differently today. It is something that I would have wanted to see and I would have expected from every level of government, because that is what people in Canada require. That is what they have said. They want ambition on the climate. They believe that the climate emergency is real and needs to be tackled. They want to see true action and they want to see a green recovery. Alors, c'est une excellente nouvelle que la Cour suprême a accepté comme constitutionnelle la loi sur la taxe sur le carbone. C'est une excellente nouvelle exactement parce que c'est le moment où nous sommes en train de considérer quels sont les éléments clés d'une relance verte. Quelles sont les choses que le gouvernement fédéral peut faire pour soutenir une relance verte, pour assurer que nous allons finalement commencer à réduire nos gaz à effet de serre, à respecter nos obligations internationales, à créer des vraies cibles et à créer des innovations pour notre relance verte. La Cour suprême aujourd'hui a dit d'abord que le changement climatique est une réalité, que ça nécessite une approche coordonnée, que le gouvernement fédéral tout à fait a le droit de s'impliquer et de créer des projets de loi et des lois pour soutenir une approche coordonnée, exactement parce que c'est un problème qui est une préoccupation nationale, que c'est une question de sécurité nationale et parce qu'il n'y a aucune province qui peut faire ce travail seul et les actions ou l'inaction d'une province a un impact sur les autres provinces. Alors, je crois que le message est clair, que notre Cour suprême croit que la crise climatique nécessite une réponse coordonnée et il y a une obligation d'agir d'une manière collaborative aussi. C'est ce que les personnes au Canada réclament aussi. Ils veulent une stratégie ambitieuse, ils veulent avoir de vraies actions et ils croient absolument que le gouvernement fédéral a un rôle très important à jouer. Alors, maintenant, c'est le moment de penser et de parler de notre relance verte. Et maintenant, nous avons encore un autre outil à utiliser dans notre création d'un plan ambitieux pour le climat. I'm so pleased today to introduce two of our young climate warriors. You know, we are always so keen to offer a voice and a platform to you. We want you to get your message out. First, I would love to know what both of you think about the decision today. I know that we were all waiting for it. And then I would love for you to share again your vision, your expectations for what a green recovery should look like. What are the things that you want to see in the budget next month? I'm going to ask you both just to introduce yourselves, and then we're going to give you a chance to share your ideas. So first, maybe just introduce yourself, Cooper and Lila. Cooper first.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm Cooper. I'm a youth climate activist from so-called Toronto, which, as Annamie said, is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, my name is Lila. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a youth climate activist from unceded Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish Territory, which is also known as Vancouver, and I organize with Sustainability Teens and Climate Strike Canada.
Thank you. Thanks for that brief introduction. So how are you feeling today? Let's start with that. How are you feeling today? What is your initial reaction? I know it's going to require a bit of unpacking, but how are you feeling today about the decision of the ruling of the Supreme Court of Canada? Cooper.
Sure. I agree completely that obviously this is a really great day in a lot of respects. I know a lot of us were quite worried about what would happen here and how the federal government have built their entire climate plan contingent on this law going forward and through the Supreme Court. So obviously there are tons of concerns that if something were to happen here, they would have no means of reaching the greenhouse gas emissions targets that they have repeatedly said that they would meet, even though obviously there is a lot of lack of accountability here. And even despite all of that, I still do have some pretty grave concerns about the fact that the provinces of this country have fought tooth and nail every step of the way to not do the absolute bare minimum. And I think about where I'm from in Ontario and how with the backstop that is implemented through the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, that is the absolute bare minimum that our province needs to be doing to tackle the climate crisis. And our Premier Ford, was not willing to do that. So in a lot of ways, this is a victory, but it also spells out something very concerning in that our premiers and our provinces across this country have fought the federal government in doing something that we know is absolutely necessary to meet our greenhouse gas emissions targets and therefore tackle the climate crisis with the urgency we know is necessary. So there's a lot of mixed emotions here today, but I'm looking forward to see what else the federal government will do to pursue a green and just recovery, and especially some other legislation that's going to be on the table in the next few months.
Absolutely. And it is so important. Thank you, Cooper. It's so important to underline this. This is a key element to reducing greenhouse gases, but it is not a plan in and of itself. It's not enough. We're missing very important things like even a credible target. We're missing many of the other elements that we need in order to do our fair share to reduce greenhouse gases. And so you're right. This is important, but in and of itself, it's not going to be enough. Lila, what are your thoughts on today's ruling?
Yeah, absolutely. I really want to echo and agree with what Cooper said. I definitely think it is disappointing that even with something like a carbon tax that is definitely the bare minimum that we should be doing to tackle the climate emergency, the federal government has struggled to actually make that a reality. And so I really want to echo everything you said, Annamie, about how today is a victory. And today we did show that both the federal government and the Supreme Court of Canada recognize that we are in an emergency, that the climate crisis is a crisis that needs to have both national and provincial responses. But I think there is a lot more work to be done from here. And I want to echo what both of you said about how the carbon tax is not going to be enough to reduce emissions, the drastic amount that we need to, and to reach net zero before or at 2050, we need to stop building new fossil fuel infrastructure, and we need to immediately transition to a renewable economy. And we can't just rely on putting a price on carbon emissions. We need to stop emitting carbon, full stop. And so I think that absolutely the carbon tax is a very important policy. And I think it's great that we are able to see that be successful today. And I think that's an amazing first step. But I don't think that that can take away from the large amount of work that still needs to be done by both the federal and provincial governments. But I really, really appreciate what you said, Annamie, about how we can only tackle the climate crisis together, and we are stronger together when we tackle the climate crisis. And I think that's absolutely true. And so I hope that the idea behind the carbon tax of really working together with the federal government and the provinces to make climate action a reality in Canada stays throughout other climate action efforts that the federal government endeavors in.
Absolutely. And let's talk about that a little bit. We are talking now about what we want the post-pandemic recovery to look like. We're imagining that right now. In the context, the Green Party has said very clearly we want to see a green and just recovery, that this is the opportunity of a lifetime for us to use the economic stimulus, the hundreds of billions of dollars that we're going to be spending to accelerate, almost in a quantum way, our progress towards reducing greenhouse gases and getting to a net zero economy. I'd love to hear from you, though. What are your expectations now that we have this extra piece of the puzzle? What expectations concretely do you have in terms of the green recovery? I mean, you mentioned some, Lila. Cooper, do you want to add some more?
Yeah, for sure. And I think Lila said it well when we talk about fossil fuel expansion and all of the projects that the government is continuing to undertake, despite the fact that we know that that's simply not compatible with the reduction in emissions that we need to fight the climate crisis. And you even look at some of the pipeline work that's been doing in BC and all of that, such as the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, and the expectation that the government needs to start with those projects if we actually want to reduce our emissions. And I'll say as well, with legislation like Bill C-12, we see the government introducing certainly progress, but then failing to actually put in place measures that increase accountability, such as a milestone year in 2025, or actually having youth voice and youth input into the policies that are affecting our futures directly. And the other thing I wanted to mention as we move forward with this green and just recovery is that the government needs to take concrete steps to actually implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples with consultation to the Indigenous peoples that is going to be affecting. And I think that's something, despite the fact that the government has promised to do and has introduced certain legislation around, they're still failing to do that in a way that actually promotes accountability and transparency and all of that. So that's my main concern right now, looking ahead to any just and green recovery, as well as just the fact that we don't know that the government is going to meet the emissions targets that they've set out, and that, quite frankly, based on the science, aren't enough to actually limit our warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and looking at the effect that we will have around the world in countries less privileged than ours, and how we incorporate that into the emissions that we are producing, because often those are left out.
Absolutely. And it's always a difficult thing. Our approach right now to tackling the climate is one that is very positive. We are unapologetically ambitious about it. We certainly don't want to be a killjoy, but the points you've made, Cooper, have to be made. You're absolutely right that even as we celebrate this one thing, I mean, it could have been worse. They could have ruled that the act was unconstitutional. That doesn't take away from the fact that the Climate Accountability Act simply does not create accountability. It doesn't take away from the fact that we still do not have a credible target, that this whole plan has been designed around a target that is only half of what we have been told it needs to be. We still have not clearly grasped the urgency of the matter and the opportunity that we have to make this great leap forward. And so all of those things, absolutely, we agree. And there is such a tremendous consensus around with climate activists around what needs to be done. Lila, this piece, the youth component of it, and feeling that there's been sufficient consultation, in terms of the budget, in terms of the green recovery, what kind of consultation would you like to see for young people in terms of the plan that we put in place? That is not we, but that is put in place.
That's a really great question. I think definitely we've seen that young people are, I think, a lot more knowledgeable and a lot wiser than they have ever been portrayed to be. And we saw with the Youth Climate Strike movement that young people were the ones to stand up and say, we are in a climate emergency, and strike from school and take to the streets to demand attention and action on that issue. But I think that young people currently are very underrepresented in politics and in decision-making spaces, even though the decisions that are made today are going to affect our future and our generation's lives the most. And so I think a key thing for me is that young people, when they are consulted, are often consulted after a policy has already been made. And just kind of ask their opinion on the policy that's existing. And it's difficult to change things at that point. And what I think would be great is, first of all, just more consultation of young people and trying to take down some of the barriers that young people face to being consulted, whether that be financial or time or whatever that may be, and making sure that a variety of voices are represented when young people are consulted. But I think also consulting young people when the policies are actually in the process of being created, and actually allowing youth to have a say into what those policies and plans actually look like would be extremely beneficial, because I think young people do know a lot about the climate crisis. Young people know the action that they want the government to take, and young people know that they want to have a safe future and a future they can look forward to. And so I think it's incredibly important to be consulting youth on policy while it's being created, because again, we are the ones who are going to be impacted by whether or not we take climate action today. We are the ones who are going to be impacted by any policies or acts or bills that our government puts forward. And so I think that's incredibly crucial in the fight for climate action.
Absolutely. And how, just since I have you here, maybe as a concluding thought, and it gives you the chance to maybe, summarize some of the things that you said. We saw last week that there's still a debate in some political sectors about whether climate change is real. How do you feel about that? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I certainly was frustrated to hear that. It is wonderful to see the Supreme Court say just explicitly, the Chief Justice, climate change is real. a major threat to our country. Does that discourage you to hear that? What was your reaction to that news?
Yeah, I think really I saw that. I was honestly quite scared of the fact that it's now 2021 and climate change is still being treated as a partisan issue when it is simply not. It's a popular issue across all demographics across Canada. And we're at the point, at this point in time, where we know, based on all available science, that we need to be taking action now, in the past, in the future, to stop the climate crisis. And the fact that certain political parties and political leaders simply aren't taking this crisis seriously, I know I can speak for myself and for other youth, that is terrifying. After years of going out in the streets and striking and making it very clear what we're demanding and what we're fighting for, we still have political leaders that are simply ignoring all that we have done and all that the people who will be bearing the brunt of the climate crisis, what they're demanding. So it's quite worrying, it's quite concerning, and I think it's something that absolutely needs to be changed as we move forward towards a potential election or just the future of policy in this country. We cannot have a major political party refusing to acknowledge the reality of the climate crisis and what simply needs to be done. And I'll say it again, based on the best available science that has been around for years now.
Yeah. Thank you, Cooper. Lila, anything to add to that?
I mean, Cooper pretty much summed it up. It's terrifying, and it's just frankly extremely unreasonable in 2021, considering all of the science that we have available to us. I think it's crystal clear that the climate crisis is real and it's caused by human activity. And so I think while it's really, really terrifying that a national political party is just able to make a statement like that in 2021, I think what's important to focus on, instead of just being terrified about that, which is obviously a terrible reality, I think focusing on electing people who are actually going to fight for climate action. And again, like Cooper said, this cannot be a partisan issue. And so it's not just focusing on electing one party, it's electing just individuals who are willing to fight for the bold climate policies that we need. And so I think moving into a potential federal election, whether that be in the spring or whether that be in the fall, it is up to every single individual Canadian who is eligible to vote to use that vote, put it to good use, and elect climate champions, elect people who believe that climate change is real and are going to fight for the policies and the actions that we need. I think that's the only thing we can do, because if the Conservative Party of Canada is going to say that climate change isn't real, we just have to keep them out of office. That's really the only option. And there's nothing we can really do about that beyond that. So I think it's really important for people who aren't eligible to vote to organize during the election, and for people who can vote to use that vote.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to the two of you. Je vais en profiter de cette opportunité pour dire que le Parti vert est toujours là pour travailler d'une manière non partisane avec tous les autres partis. Nous avons déjà en plusieurs occasions invité les autres partis de nous joindre dans un cabinet exactement pour créer un plan pour lutter contre la crise climatique d'une manière non partisane. I just wanted to say that the Green Party stands at the ready to work with all political parties on the climate. You're absolutely right. It is not a partisan issue. We have invited and continue to invite all the parties to join with us and form a cabinet and inner cabinet focused on the climate in the way that we did when we first were in the first months of the COVID-19 pandemic. To work in a manner of cooperation and collaboration on this issue, which is an existential crisis, a national security threat, and therefore transcends all partisan concerns. And it is absolutely, we have on the one hand a party that was not able to agree that climate change is real, but on the other hand, we have parties that struggle to understand that even though you say climate change is real, if you continue to build pipelines, if you continue to frack gas, if you continue to approve oil exploration projects, that none of those things are consistent with an understanding that climate change is real and we have very little time. I wanted to sincerely thank you both for being here today. you know you'll be back because we absolutely love having youth activists here. We know that it's challenging now to get the messages out, and so we're honored to share our platform with you. Thank you for being leaders and advocates on behalf of these issues. I know you're both too young to run, or I'd invite you right now to run with the Green Party. This is a moment for total ambition. This is a moment that I would say has been reinforced by what we heard today from the Supreme Court of Canada. Nothing but that kind of unapologetic ambition on behalf of the climate is acceptable to me. I, like you, want to be part of the generation of Canadians that turned the tide. I can't imagine anything more satisfying to be able to look back and say that we were part of that generation of Canadians that turned the tide once and for all. Merci à tout le monde d'être ici avec nous et à Cooper et Lila pour leur participation, leurs recommandations et leur leadership. J'espère que nous allons continuer de travailler ensemble pour lutter contre la crise. C'est le moment d'être ambitieux d'une manière vraiment épique. Et nous sommes là pour travailler avec tous les partis. On se regarde. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us today. And thank you again to Cooper and Lila.
Thank you, everybody. This ends the Facebook Live part of the conference. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. Are there any questions, please? Est-ce qu'il y a des questions, s'il vous plaît? On a le temps pour quelques questions. Non, il n'y a pas de questions. Donc, alors, ça conclut la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui. This concludes today's conference.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Everybody. Merci à tout le monde.